And I've tried everything. I've had Wix, Squarespace, other people's pixels, like almost every single platform. Right now I use Cargo Collective. It was free for a long time, up until like a year or two ago, but it's still like, I think $7 a month or something. And so you get so much more than you would at Squarespace. It's a little bit more limited than something like Wix, but it has more agency than something like Squarespace. And I have tried, I think, every different way to have my work online. Mm-hmm. And I don't really know how I feel about my website currently, but some of the things that I did like was having the bifurcation. Instead of having things into like series of work, and I work in series, so it's so tempting to have that. Mm-hmm. Just have current, very pared down, like maximum, I think my cutoff is like 10 months, anything I've made in 10 months, and then everything else is just in an endless archive. And I wanted it to be neutral gray, but then when you also do like natural vision light versus projected light, that's really harsh. So it's a very light gray. And yeah, when I think about my work and context, that like really fucks with my brain anyway. So I kind of like them being like these disembodied parts that just float, and like that uncomfortable sensation, I feel like it sits well with me.
Yeah.
Just information of what scale, what are the materials, maybe what it's called, and then the other bits just being like my CV. At some point I had a statement, and I think I took a statement down because I changed it too
I didn't
much.
see a statement.
Okay, then it's probably gone.
Yeah. I liked the I'd never seen the digital collages. When are those from?
Those were the ones that I had on Plexi in the first semester.
Yes.
And I was like, I want AstroTurf behind them.
Yeah, that's right.
I borrowed your white AstroTurf.
Yeah,
but then I just had them like propped up on the floor against the wall. The way that I would want to show those, I can't afford to.
Which is how?
I would like them printed on textured plexiglass and backlit inside of like some wooden frame.
Yeah.
And it's just like the idea of that's interesting. Do I like it enough to spend the money doing that? No.
Yeah, no.
Or even time too.
Yeah,
I'm like,
right.
Oh, that's a nice thought.
Yeah, maybe if you're playing with house money, that's something you can do, right? But
right.
I mean, that's a good. It leads back to what you were saying about like photography, like photography never feels finished, right?
Yeah.
And I think part of that is that it's digital photography.
Yeah.
Like when you're doing darkroom photography, it's a different thing, but like I know that's something I've wondered about is like how can I feel like photography? It's just like this digital file. So what the fuck? Like that doesn't feel good ever.
I mean, I think
so what do you do with
other people can do it. Like I've seen a lot of digital work that I love.
Mm-hmm.
Like video, photography, stills, things that never get printed out, exist only on screens or like QR codes that you're sent to. And I think it's great. I just don't know that my brain can work like that.
Yeah.
Like whenever I attempt to do something like that, I'm like, oh, but what if it had like actual googly eyes though? But it can't because it's just on a screen, and then the texture part of it just destroys me.
Right.
And I feel that way also about like slick paintings. I have the same reaction to making a slick painting as I would making a digital file.
Just flimsiness, right? Or like just like shallowness, like.
I don't know. I mean, for other people, I think it works. Like the person I collaborate with the most, paintings are like the surface is glass, and I love them. If I were to do that, I would just feel like there's nothing that has traction for me, and I would need it to have some sort of. I mean, maybe it's just the time thing, like an impression of time.
Yeah.
Even though, like with her work, it's clear when you look at it that there's so much time that's invested in these different parts, but then the surface is just treated in a way that you don't have the tactile sensation of that. You just have to like know as a painter, like, oh right, all of these things were taped off very meticulously to make these patterns and whatever, but it doesn't hit you.
Yeah.
Physically. There's no physical punch.
And you want your work to have that physical punch, or you need it to.
I feel like I'm satisfied when I feel like the mind-body split is kind of just dissolved into an experience where there's no, like, I don't have to think about my body reaction in like this mental processing like I would with her work, say, because I have to think about what I'm looking at, to think about the body parts of it, and also the same thing for body.
Right. Okay. Where to go from here? All right, let's talk a little bit about writing.
Okay.
So I know that you write a lot.
I do.
And one thing that so this is, I don't really like the way I wrote this question, but I'm just going to ask it.
I love it.
So one thing that I remember being, let's say, leveled at your work in, I think it was a review, was that its written aspect, what you said, basically, what you wrote and then read, was more developed than the
Spring Final Review.
Spring Final Review.
Oh, yeah.
I think it might have been Lucy who said it. Anyways,
everyone
said it.
Except for Jaya.
Except for Jaya, who was like, no, I get it. It's like a meta thing. Right, exactly. So that being said, how do you sort of balance those two aspects, first of all? Like a written component and a visual component? Are they counterparts like that? Or are they complementary? Or are they like, is it weighted in one way? And then the follow-up question being like, how do you kind of deal with those sort of double timelines of like the work and then the written thing? And is there a situation where you ever feel like one is ahead of another? Are they trying to describe the same thing? Like, just how do you think about it?
Well, I mean, that's just so muddy. I think if I thought about it clearly, I wouldn't have that problem. I mean, writing is very utilitarian in that it's cheap and it doesn't require any space or materials. And I've been writing forever. I don't really consider myself a writer, although Lucy would love for me to like publish things instead of make art, but that's like a whole other thing. I don't know. Like I think, how did I try to describe this to someone recently? So I think everyone has a way that they internally think about things, and for some people it's a dialogue and it's verbal, like a vernacular type thing. I think some people it's like less of vernacular and more of like a polished language. For some people it's visual or math or whatever. And for me, I feel like the way that I naturally think about things is colors and shapes and lines and geometry. So if I have thoughts about things, it's relationships with that. And then the first translation is trying to make it a verbal vernacular sentiment. So if I'm writing, it's already like a translation from like one mental language to another. And then from there, it can become visual and it can go back and forth. And there are times when I skip the writing part and just try to jump into like visual geometry if I'm working abstract, and then I write about it after. But I like the idea of having both sort of being like second languages to the thought, and then having them talk to each other and sort of get lost in translation. With writing stuff now,